An entitled Karen demanded a selfie with the royal guard, certain she could bend the rules. But one unexpected move shattered both her ego and her phone. Here's how this reality check unfolded. But before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe to the channel because tomorrow at the same time we'll bring you another story of courage and discipline from the Royal Guards that you won't want to miss. The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Buckingham Palace as Guard Harold Langston assumed his post. 12 years of military service had earned him more than just the right to wear the prestigious uniform of the Queen's Guard. 2 tours in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq had taught him the true meaning of duty. Each crease in his scarlet tunic, each gleaming button, each precise movement spoke of dedication that went far beyond ceremonial display. Langston's eyes, fixed forward with unwavering discipline, took in the growing crowd of tourists gathering for the morning viewing. After years of service, he could read a crowd like a battlefield report. Families with excited children, respectful visitors studying their guidebooks, and occasionally those who saw the guards as nothing more than props in their personal entertainment. That's when he first noticed her. "Excuse me, hello? Do you people not understand English?" Karen Winter's voice cut through the morning air like a rusty saw, making several nearby tourists wince. Her designer sunglasses, perched atop meticulously highlighted hair, probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "I said I need someone to direct me to the best photo spot." A young palace staff member approached her with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, there are designated viewing areas." "I didn't fly 6,000 miles to be herded around like cattle," Karen interrupted, her manicured hand dismissively waving away his assistance. "Do you have any idea who I am? Back in Houston, people know better than to keep me waiting." The staff member maintained his composure, though his smile tightened slightly. "The palace has specific protocols for all visitors." "Protocols?" Karen's laugh was sharp enough to startle a group of pigeons into flight. "Listen, sweetie, I'm not all visitors. My husband's law firm handles cases worth more than this entire street. Now," she adjusted her Gucci handbag with practiced contempt, "are you going to help me? Or do I need to speak with your supervisor?" Langston remained motionless, but his military training had taught him to notice everything. He observed how other tourists began creating space around Karen, the way parents pulled their children closer, how an elderly British couple exchanged knowing glances before moving away. 12 years of service had shown him every type of disrespect imaginable, but there was something different about this woman, a calculated entitlement that set off warning signals honed in combat zones. "This is ridiculous," Karen announced to no one in particular, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "In America, we understand customer service. This whole place is basically a tourist attraction, but you people act like it's some kind of sacred ground." A young mother trying to guide her children past received a sharp elbow as Karen moved toward the palace gates. "Watch it! Some of us paid good money to be here." She paused, surveying the growing morning crowd like a general assessing an unworthy army. "And what's with all these lines? Don't you have a VIP entrance or something?" Langston's jaw tightened imperceptibly beneath his stoic expression. In Afghanistan, he'd learned to recognize brewing trouble, the subtle signs that preceded chaos. As Karen's voice grew louder, her demands more insistent, he could sense the same tension building in the morning air. Years of battlefield experience told him that this seemingly routine morning was about to become anything but ordinary. Karen's path through the crowd left a wake of muttered apologies, not from her, but from those trying to avoid her increasingly aggressive movements. Her first attempt at photographing a guard at the far gate had ended with her complaining loudly about his rude refusal to smile or pose. "Can you believe this?" she demanded of a nearby American couple who seemed more interested in finding an escape route from her attention. "They stand there like statues, acting all high and mighty. Hello?" She waved her hand in front of the distant guard's face. "Anyone home in there?" A well-dressed British gentleman cleared his throat. "Madam, if I may explain, the Queen's Guard are active duty soldiers. Their ceremonial duties require—" "Active duty?" Karen scoffed, turning to face him with the same expression she used on waiters who brought her room-temperature water. "Please, I've seen mall cops with more personality. They're just playing dress-up for tourists." The gentleman's wife touched his arm gently, a silent signal to let it go. But Karen was just warming up, her voice carrying across the courtyard with practiced authority. "I mean, look at those ridiculous hats. What are they supposed to be anyway? Looks like something from a costume shop." "Those are bearskin caps, actually," offered a young student who immediately regretted speaking up. "They're a tradition dating back to—" "Tradition?" Karen's laugh could have stripped paint. "Honey, where I come from, tradition means knowing how to treat paying customers with respect." She adjusted her designer blouse, a movement calculated to display the watch that cost more than some people's cars. "And I've paid plenty to be here." As she made her way closer to Langston's post, other tourists began exchanging uncomfortable glances. A group of Japanese visitors quietly redirected their tour route, while a family from Canada ushered their children to a different viewing spot. The morning sun had climbed higher, but the growing warmth did nothing to thaw Karen's icy disdain. "You know what really gets me?" she announced to her reluctant audience, her voice pitched to carry. "Everyone acts like these guards are so special. But look at them, just standing there, ignoring paying visitors. In America, this would never fly. We understand the value of customer service." Langston remained motionless, but his trained senses catalogued every movement as Karen drew nearer. Through 2 tours in combat zones, he'd developed an instinct for approaching threats. Something in her bearing, the deliberate provocation, the calculated disrespect, triggered the same warnings he'd once felt in distant war zones. "Excuse me," a middle-aged woman in a Union Jack scarf tried one last time to intervene. "The Guards are an honoured tradition. They've served in Afghanistan, Iraq—" "Served?" Karen's voice dripped with skepticism. "Standing around like mannequins isn't service. My nephew works at Disney World. At least he interacts with visitors." She pulled out her phone, its jewelled case catching the sunlight. "Watch this. I'll show you how to handle these toy soldiers." The morning crowd had grown larger, but a clear space had formed around Karen. A bubble of discomfort as tourists sensed the approaching confrontation. An elderly man wearing a veteran's pin shook his head slowly, recognition of brewing trouble earned through years of military experience. "Hey, soldier boy!" Karen's voice took on the sharp edge she usually reserved for service workers who failed to recognize her perceived status. "I'm talking to you. You think that uniform makes you special? Let's see how well you handle a real American who knows her rights." Langston's eyes remained fixed forward, his posture perfect, but combat-honed instincts were sending clear signals. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that the most dangerous moments often came disguised as routine situations. As Karen stepped deliberately into his personal space, he could feel the same tension he'd known in combat, the calm before an inevitable storm. "Listen here," Karen planted herself directly in front of Langston, her designer heels bringing her eye level with his ceremonial brass buttons. "I've had just about enough of this silent treatment. Do you know how much I paid for this vacation?" The morning crowd had grown still, conversations dying mid-sentence as tourists sensed the mounting tension. Langston maintained his forward gaze, each breath measured and controlled, just as it had been during firefights in Helmand Province. But Karen was far from finished. "I demand to speak to whoever's in charge," she announced, her voice echoing off the palace walls. "This is completely unacceptable. I've been to theme parks with better customer service than this." An elderly British couple approached cautiously. The man, wearing a Royal Marines veteran's pin, spoke with measured authority. "Madam, perhaps you don't understand. These guards are combat veterans. Combat veterans?" Karen's laugh was sharp enough to make several children flinch. Standing here playing statue while real people try to enjoy their vacation. Please." She turned back to Langston, her face inches from his. "If you're such a brave soldier, why can't you even look at me when I'm talking to you?" The veteran's wife touched his arm as he opened his mouth to respond. Years of military service had taught them both when a situation was beyond reasoning. They retreated slowly, but their presence remained, silent witnesses to what was unfolding. "You people think you're so special with your little ceremonies and traditions," Karen continued, circling Langston like a predator testing its prey. "Back home, we have Disneyland employees who do a better job interacting with guests. At least they understand basic courtesy." A young mother tried to hurry her children past, but Karen's voice stopped them. "Oh no, stay! Let your kids see how their tax money is being wasted on these human mannequins. Can't even be bothered to smile for a photo." Langston's military training had taught him to read situations, to anticipate threats before they materialized. Something in Karen's bearing, the deliberate provocation, the calculated invasion of space, spoke of escalation to come. His fingers remained perfectly still on his ceremonial rifle, but combat-honed instincts were sending clear warnings. "I said, look at me when I'm talking to you." Karen's voice rose sharper, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "What kind of service is this? In America, you'd be fired for this kind of behavior." The crowd had grown larger but more distant, creating a circle of empty space around the unfolding confrontation. Parents whispered explanations to confused children. Tourists lowered their cameras, and palace staff began moving purposefully toward the scene. "You think that uniform gives you the right to ignore me?" Karen's designer purse swung dangerously close to Langston's face as she gestured. "I'll have you know my husband's firm handles cases bigger than this entire palace. One phone call, that's all it would take." Langston's eyes remained fixed forward, but his peripheral vision caught everything. The way Karen's hands were clenching and unclenching, the nervous shifting of the crowd, the subtle movements of palace security in the distance. In Afghanistan, he'd learned that the most dangerous moments weren't always the obvious ones. "Fine," Karen's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You want to play it this way? Let's see how well your precious protocol handles this." She reached into her purse, pulling out her new iPhone 15 Pro Max. "Since you won't cooperate for a proper photo, we'll do this my way." The veteran with the Royal Marines pin took a step forward, recognizing the signs of imminent confrontation. "Mom, I really must insist." "Oh, shut up!" Karen snapped, her composure completely evaporating. "I'm so sick of you people and your precious traditions. This is supposed to be a tourist attraction, but you all act like it's some kind of sacred ground." She turned back to Langston, her face flushed with anger and entitlement. "Last chance, soldier boy. Either you pose properly for this photo, or things are going to get very interesting for your superiors when I'm done complaining." The morning sun cast harsh shadows across the courtyard as Karen raised her phone, her other hand moving with deliberate purpose toward Langston's uniform. "I said, look at me!" Karen's manicured fingers shot out, grabbing Langston's scarlet tunic collar with surprising force. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible, echoing across the courtyard like a gunshot. "Now you're going to give me that photo, whether you like it or not." Her grip tightened on the ceremonial uniform, years of entitlement lending strength to her fingers as she pulled him closer. Langston's bearskin cap tilted slightly, the first disruption to his perfect bearing since assuming his post at dawn. The morning sun caught his regimental brass buttons as his body was forced to pivot. "That's better," Karen's voice carried a triumphant edge as she raised her iPhone with her free hand. "See? Was that so hard? Now smile for the camera like a good little soldier." Her fingers dug deeper into the collar, wrinkling the immaculate fabric that Langston had spent hours pressing to perfection. The elderly veteran stepped forward again, his face tight with controlled anger. "Young woman, you are assaulting a member of Her Majesty's—" "Assaulting?" Karen barked a harsh laugh, never taking her eyes off her phone's screen as she tried to frame the perfect shot. "Please, I'm a paying tourist trying to get a simple photo. If he'd just cooperated in the first place." Her words cut off abruptly as she felt Langston's posture shift. It wasn't a large movement, nothing like the dramatic reactions she'd hoped to provoke. Instead, it was the subtle change of a combat veteran transitioning from ceremonial duty to addressing a threat. "Don't you dare move," she hissed, adjusting her grip on his collar. "I've put up with enough of your attitude. One photo, that's all I wanted. One simple photo to show everyone back home how ridiculous this whole thing is." The phone's camera hovered inches from Langston's face, its jeweled case glinting in the morning sun. Karen's thumb moved toward the capture button, her red-painted nail a stark contrast against the screen. "Now, let's show everyone what these mighty guards really—" What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion for the stunned onlookers. Langston's white-gloved hand moved with the precision of years of military training, not toward Karen's grip on his collar, but toward the phone that represented every ounce of disrespect she'd shown to his uniform, his service, and the institution he'd sworn to protect. The crack of his palm against the phone was sharp and decisive. The iPhone flew from Karen's grasp, spinning through the morning air like a fallen leaf before striking the courtyard stones with a sound that made several tourists flinch. The screen shattered on impact, spiderweb cracks spreading across its surface like a roadmap of consequences. "My phone!" Karen's shriek echoed off the palace walls as she released Langston's collar, staring in horror at her shattered device. "Do you have any idea how much that cost? How dare you? How dare you?" Her face had turned the same shade as Langston's tunic, designer sunglasses slipping down her nose as she trembled with rage. "I'll have your job for this. I'll have this whole place shut down. You can't treat me like this. Do you know who I am?" Langston had already resumed his post, his collar slightly askew, but his bearing otherwise perfect. The only sign of what had transpired was a subtle tension in his jaw, visible only to those who knew what to look for. "This is assault." Karen's voice rose higher, her carefully maintained appearance crumbling along with her sense of control. "He attacked me. Did everyone see that? He deliberately attacked me." The crowd had grown larger now, but no one moved to support her claims. Instead, several phones had emerged to record her meltdown, though their owners kept a safe distance, recognizing the dangerous glint in her eyes. "You people are all witnesses." She spun in a circle, designer heels scraping against the stones. "This thug in a costume just destroyed thousands of dollars of private property. I'll have the embassy involved. Her tirade cut off as two palace security officers approached, their movements calm but purposeful. Behind them, a police constable spoke quietly into his radio, his experienced eyes assessing the situation. "Ma'am!" The senior security officer, Chief Inspector Roberts, spoke with the measured calm of someone who'd spent 20 years handling diplomatic incidents at the palace. His silver hair and weathered face carried the gravitas of experience as he positioned himself between Karen and Langston. "You need to step back and calm down. You've already committed a serious offence by grabbing the guard's uniform. In fact, under Section 4A of the Public Order Act..." "Offence?" Karen's laugh was sharp enough to make nearby pigeons take flight, the sound echoing off the palace walls like broken glass. "He destroyed my property. Look at it." She pointed at the phone, her manicured finger shaking with rage, the red nail polish matching the growing flush in her cheeks. "That's a limited edition iPhone 15 Pro Max with custom crystal case. You can't even get them in England yet. Do you know how many people are on the waiting list for this model back home?" The police constable, Officer George Hensley, had moved closer, his black notebook open and pen poised. His young face carried the serious expression of someone dealing with their first major palace incident. According to multiple witnesses, you physically assaulted a member of the Queen's Guard by grabbing his collar and attempting to force physical contact. That's a serious criminal offence under British law. Specifically, criminal offence? Karen spun toward him with such force that her Gucci handbag went flying, spilling its expensive contents across the courtyard stones. Her highlighted hair, which had probably cost more than the constable's monthly salary, whipped wild around her face. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? My husband's firm, Winters and Associates, handles international law for half the Fortune 500. We'll bury this place in so many lawsuits your great-grandchildren will be paying them off. I'll have every lawyer in London. The elderly veteran, his chest decorated with campaign medals from conflicts most had forgotten, stepped forward with the quiet authority of someone who'd faced far worse than an entitled tourist. His Royal Marines pin caught the sunlight as he spoke. Young woman, I served 30 years in Her Majesty's forces, including the Falklands and Gulf War. What you did today... Oh, spare me your service stories, Karen snapped, her designer blouse now dishevelled from her dramatic gestures, the silk wrinkled in ways its Italian designers never intended. This isn't some war zone, Grandpa. This is supposed to be a tourist attraction. We pay good money, thousands of dollars, to visit this overrated palace, and this is how we're treated, like criminals, because one of your toy soldiers couldn't handle a simple photo request. Langston remained motionless, his ceremonial rifle held with perfect precision, but those who looked closely might have noticed a slight whitening of his knuckles beneath his white gloves. His mind flashed briefly to a firefight in Helmand Province, where he'd faced Taliban insurgents with less hostility than this woman was showing over a broken phone. At least the Taliban's motives had made some kind of sense. Right, that's enough, Officer Mitchell said firmly, closing his notebook with a decisive snap. His rookie status forgotten in the face of clear disrespect for the institution he'd sworn to protect. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside and provide some identification. We can handle this civilly or... Identification! Karen's voice rose another octave, making several tourists cover their ears. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up toward her hairline. You want identification? How about I call the American consulate instead? Let's see how quickly this little power trip of yours ends when diplomatic immunity gets involved. I have friends in the State Department who... She fumbled in her designer purse, now hastily recovered from the ground, probably searching for her phone, before remembering its shattered state. This seemed to enrage her further, her face turning a shade of red that matched Langston's tunic. Look what you've done! I can't even call my lawyer because of your thuggish behaviour. Do you know how many important contacts I had on that phone? How many deals were waiting for my approval? Chief Inspector Roberts exchanged knowing glances with his junior officer. In 2 decades of palace security, he'd seen every type of entitled visitor imaginable, but Karen's level of aggressive privilege was setting new records. He spoke quietly into his radio, requesting additional support. Control, this is Roberts. Subject becoming increasingly hostile. Request backup at North Gate. Ma'am, this is your final warning. Officer Mitchell's voice had hardened, all trace of rookie uncertainty gone. His hand moved purposefully toward his belt. Either you calm down and cooperate, or I'll have no choice but to place you under arrest for assault and disturbing the peace. To what? Karen stepped toward him, her Jimmy Choo heels clicking against the stones like angry exclamation points, each step punctuating her rage. Arrest me! Go ahead, try it! I'll have every newspaper in America running stories about how tourists are treated at your precious palace. CNN will be all over this. British Guards assault American tourist. How's that for a headline? The morning crowd had grown larger, maintaining a safe distance but unable to look away from the unfolding scene. Parents used it as a teachable moment, quietly explaining to their children why respect for tradition and authority mattered. See, one mother whispered to her wide-eyed daughter, this is why we talked about showing proper respect. Langston's face remained impassive, every line of his bearing reflecting the discipline earned through years of military service. But his training had taught him to recognize when a situation was beyond de-escalation. As Karen's voice rose to near hysterical levels, bouncing off centuries-old stones that had witnessed far greater dramas, he could sense the approaching end to this confrontation, though not the one she was expecting. "This isn't over," she declared, jabbing her French manicured finger toward Langston's unmoving form, her designer bracelet jangling with each aggressive gesture. "You haven't heard the last of this. I'll have your job, your pension, your entire career. By the time my lawyers are finished—" The distinct sound of handcuffs being unclasped cut through her tirade like a knife, the metal-on-metal click echoing across the suddenly silent courtyard with finality. "You can't be serious," Karen sputtered as the police constable moved toward her with handcuffs ready. "You're actually going to arrest me? After what he did?" She gestured wildly at Langston, who remained as immobile as the palace walls behind him. "Assaulting a member of the Queen's Guard, disturbing the peace, refusing to comply with security officers," the constable listed off, his voice carrying the weary tone of someone who'd seen this scenario too many times. "Would you like me to continue?" "This is outrageous!" Karen's voice bounced off the ancient stones as the handcuffs clicked into place. "I'm an American citizen. You can't treat me like some common criminal." The security officers had formed a protective barrier between her and Langston, though their presence was hardly necessary. The guard's bearing remained perfect, his dedication to duty unshaken by the morning's events. Only those who looked very closely might have noticed the slight, satisfied tightening at the corners of his mouth. "My husband will hear about this," Karen continued as the constable began leading her away. "We'll sue everyone. The palace, the police, that mindless robot in the red coat. Do you have any idea how much money we have?" Her designer heels scraped against the courtyard stones as she tried to dig in her heels, quite literally fighting authority until the very end. "And my phone! Someone better pick up my phone. That's evidence of his assault." A palace staff member carefully collected the shattered iPhone, placing it in an evidence bag with the same ceremony usually reserved for royal artifacts. The cracked screen caught the sunlight one final time, a fitting monument to shattered entitlement. "This whole country is a joke!" Karen's voice was fading as she was led toward the waiting police car, "playing dress-up and calling it tradition. In America, we know how to treat paying customers." The crowd began to disperse, parents guiding their children away while quietly explaining why respect for tradition mattered. The elderly veteran and his wife lingered a moment longer, exchanging knowing looks. They'd seen enough real service to understand the strength it took to maintain composure in the face of such disrespect. As the police car pulled away, Karen's continued protests muffled behind its windows. Langston remained at his post. Meanwhile, Guard Langston's collar had been straightened by a fellow guard during the next rotation. The only visible evidence of the confrontation erased with military precision. He continued his watch with the same unwavering dedication, his bearing perhaps even more resolute after the morning's events. In the police station across London, Karen's demands for her constitutional rights and calls to the American embassy fell on deaf ears. Her designer outfit and privileged attitude carried little weight in a system where respect for tradition and law still meant something. The shattered iPhone, now safely catalogued in an evidence bag, would serve as a reminder that some things, tradition, duty, respect, couldn't be purchased with even the most expensive currency. Its broken screen, like its owner's broken assumptions about privilege, would never quite be the same. What did you think about this clash between entitlement and tradition? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective on how Guard Langston handled this delicate situation. Have you ever witnessed someone learning a hard lesson about respect? Or perhaps you've seen other encounters with the Queen's Guard that left a lasting impression. Let us know in the comments section. If you appreciated this story about dignity and duty, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life encounters with the Royal Guards. Hit that bell icon to stay notified about our newest uploads. Check out our previous videos appearing on your screen right now to discover more stories about those who stand guard over tradition and respect. Until next time, remember, true respect isn't demanded, it's earned.